Jonathan Freirich. I'm a rabbi here in Buffalo. We are joined today by a whole bunch of people, which is really amazing. We are at the Teddy Roosevelt inaugural site where Teddy Roosevelt took the oath of office. A very interesting person to highlight in our discussion today, because of course Teddy Roosevelt is part of the imperial America, and therefore, depending upon how you look at it, part of the problem. What is Accomplices for Justice? We are conscious that this is an introduction to a process or progress towards a place we haven't found yet. Reverend Hughes and I are doing this in large part because we don't know the place we need to go, but we know that it starts with trusted conversation. And so that is our framing. I said I'm a rabbi here in Buffalo, working with an organization called Open Door Judaism, which is our Accomplices for Justice sponsor. If you'd like to help us out, feel free to donate to the cause, and I will leave links in that as we go through. Reverend Hughes, you want to introduce yourself?
I am Reverend Dr. Wylie Hughes. I'm pastor of Orchard Park Presbyterian Church in Orchard Park, New York, and I am also engaged in this conversation about who we are as a country, who we are as a people, who we are as a community, and how we could be all of those things together with soul.
With soul. Our new caveat is really with soul. All right. And with you today is a bunch of your family. Jerry doesn't want to be on camera, but I'm going to show her for a minute.
Yes,
So,
my wife and my in-laws and my children are here as well. So our whole family is here.
Very cool.
Yes.
And with us also are two of our biggest fans and participants and contributors. So we very much appreciate Allison and Barb for you being here. And I imagine, what did you have to think about the tour of the Teddy Roosevelt site today?
I was impressed by what is shown and what is told, and the docent. It certainly says it's a very different time from today. There are certain, America is the greatest, and that was a rousing call at the time. Of course, I compare everything to how is it today, and also the colonial times in Africa, Asia, South America, North America. So it was a learning experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Barb, you wanted to contribute?
I have a little different take on it. I think that some of the things that some of the thoughts, some of the feelings of the country, some of them have not changed.
How do you mean?
Our superiority.
So one of the things that's, I think, that you have picked up on, both of you, is that there is a deep sort of American is number one ism coming from Roosevelt and the ethos around, we are in an American holy site. And right, there is a whole American mythos around our holy sites, which ignores a lot of the things that we have done wrong.
I agree.
And so were very much at pains to elevate Booker T. Washington, with whom Teddy Roosevelt had a relationship. It doesn't take long to scratch the surface of African-American self-identity to recognize that the relationship between Booker T. Washington and the advancement of African-Americans is not a singular point.
Right.
Well, Booker T was a man of merit, the tyranny of merit.
Well, what they wanted to show was that Teddy Roosevelt had a relationship had a black friend.
Yes.
Exactly.
And And unlike Frederick Douglass before him, Booker T. Washington is not hailed with a uniform, hey, we love him approach by African Americans today.
Right.
His identity, his legacy has undergone a lot of different conversations. So I think part of the grappling with American history, and that's actually our purpose today, is to grapple with the stories we tell about ourselves, because the stories we tell about ourselves and the stories we tell about where we come from contribute to the story that we're trying to build.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to start with a personal story. It just so happens the subject of your personal story is here today. I don't know if you want to include her.
No, she's preoccupied.
So you want to tell us, Dr. Hughes, Reverend Dr. Hughes, about your recent encounter with history and telling of history in your household.
So my daughter came to me and asked me about Ruby Bridges. And hold on, I think I'm muted. Let me unmute myself. So she came to me and asked me about Ruby Bridges. And apparently she was reading a book about Ruby Bridges' story. And she understood the story itself, right? But she was trying to understand what was the big deal. Why couldn't she go to school? Why were all the National Guard's people there? Why didn't they want her to go to school? And I realized that her confusion came from a lack of education. So the story may have been told, but the context behind the story was omitted, right? To which I think that's a detriment to the country. Because if we don't know the context behind all of these so-called great achievements, then we'll never understand what any of those moments mean. The children won't understand what it means to be in a multi-diverse school. My daughter didn't understand that, right? She doesn't understand that she's at a school, she's one of the few Black people at her school. She didn't understand how significant that was because of Ruby Bridges, right? But not for Ruby Bridges and all the countless other students, even my mom's generation, they had the same issue. Now, they didn't have to have police escort, but they were the first one of the first African Americans in their county to integrate high school. And the hardships they had to go through being the first is just not taught, right? It's just not taught. They talk about the incidents, right? All of these incidents happened, but they don't talk about the context of those incidents and the precipitation of those incidents, how they came to be, and then the fallout afterwards, right? Ruby Bridges even now has been in several documentaries where she talks about, because she's still alive, she's still living. And they ask her about that. And, I'm not going to go into those things. That may be for another episode, but to hear her talk about the fallout that she had to live through 30 more years, even after that, is the reason why we need to take a second look at our history. Not to make people feel bad, but so that we can understand where we came from and how we got here and how we can move forward in a better direction.
So one of the things that you point out that's really important in this, and that you and I have been working on a lot, is this question of how to not make people feel bad in a way that prevents us from doing better.
Yeah.
Right. So one of the big motivations behind current sort of DEI ideas is the white fragility movement.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the, and we've talked about the degree to which shame is not a motivating force for a lot of people, right? And we've talked about, that Malcolm X critiqued Dr. King on this question of whether or not shame could actually move white people who wouldn't otherwise move into doing better.
Right. He was very critical of that. Not so much critical of the nonviolent movement, but critical of the idea that if we subject ourselves to humiliation publicly, that America will be ashamed of itself. and the shame would be great enough to initiate change. And Malcolm X's argument was, you cannot shame a shameless people. If the people have no shame, then you're just getting beat up. And you're getting beat up on the national news, but nothing's going to change.
And of course, we are also asking Americans en masse to make a change among people who are all struggling.
Mm.
So there's always, and what the history that we're looking at now is really highlights is the degree to which people are placed at odds with one another, who all stand to benefit if only the people with the most would give something up.
Right.
So, and there's everyone, because if there are a number of things that Professor Manisha, Professor Sinha points out that are really important to take into account. We've talked about them in a couple of other places, but I think there are really 5 elements that she highlights as essential to the hope of a second republic of the United States that are all dashed, with the exception of the 19th Amendment. Right? So there is some final sort of conclusion of that there. But so what are those 5 elements? One of them is predatory capitalism.
Yes.
That the United States is founded on this idea that there are endless resources to be exploited, including people, for the sake of enriching white people. Specifically for the sake of enriching rich white people. Right? White people without a lot are also exploited for the sake of the ruling class, down to George Washington going and he is the only sitting president to have led U.S. military forces. Why? For the sake of quelling the Whiskey Rebellion in Western Pennsylvania. One of the things about that is frontier holdings were actually the way he made money. So Washington's defense of the frontier was about Washington's defense of the landed classes making money selling land that they had claimed.
Yes.
So the predatory capitalism is all over the place. It's not just enslaving people. It's the use of the land. It's the use of industry eventually over time.
Yeah, the exploitation on behalf of corporations, right?
Absolutely.
You know,
because it's not only in the last 20 years that corporations get given citizenship.
Exactly.
In Citizens United.
Yeah, this has been going on for a while.
The Supreme Court took the 14th and 15th Amendments and made them about corporate citizenship.
Yes.
And ceased to enforce them for the sake of individual citizenship. So predatory capitalism is a big through line here, all the way through American history. Then, obviously, the enslavement of African Americans. And one of the things that our conversation last time about housing inequity pointed out is that the housing inequity rules were an abuse of the 13th Amendment, because by creating second-class citizenship through housing, we ignored the illegality of enslaving people.
Yeah.
Anti-indigenous genocide, number 3, also a big part of this story, because of the continuation of the defeat of the Second Republic, of the call them the Reconstruction.
Reconstruction period.
Is coupled with the total destruction of Native Americans.
Yeah, because where was the land where'd they get the land from? Right? This mass expansion, you know, as they broke free from the colonies and they expanded west, well, that land wasn't empty as they say it was. It was very inhabited. And so there was a genocide, and there had to have been a genocide in order for people to claim land. Right.
And the continued perpetuation of the genocide that
was
affected in large part by disease and conquest early on was continued. Obviously, we talk about misogyny and patriarchy, and that's another through line, which again was used as a divide and conquer tactic as well.
Right.
There was a Southern strategy to women's suffrage
Mm-hmm.
that said we're going to work for white women's capacity to
Right.
vote at the expense of African American women
Right.
and at the expense of African American men.
Right. Right.
And the other thing about the fifth element of all of this, the fifth dimension, is the xenophobia imperialism piece that continues to allow the United States to use anybody who's defined as other for its own profit.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, Chinese immigrants who are, not accorded equal status for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, the continuation of this actually goes on in this book, which I adore and and is one of the hardest books to read, How to Hide an Empire, about the degree to which we ignore that one of the biggest holdings, the fourth biggest city in the United States in 1900 was Manila. Manila,
Mm-hmm.
right? The Philippines were an American territory.
Yes.
And the fourth most populous city was Manila. There were more people in 1900, I believe, living in the U.S. territories than there were African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
By a factor of 50%.
That's insane.
So and of course, it's the tension about talking about American Empire in the Teddy Roosevelt inaugural site is
Yeah. Yeah.
So these are 5 through lines, and instead of talking about them as sources of shame, let's talk about them as the history that we need to grapple with in order to stop repeating it over and over again. Because what we're in, if we're looking at a third Reconstruction, if we're looking at the establishment, therefore, of a real fourth republic, a fourth American republic, we have to accept that the reason we keep on going through this over and over again is because we keep on failing to grapple with the original issue.
Right. Right. I mean, and you echo the words of Ibrahim Kendi, who, they were interviewing him about his book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and they were criticizing him for his tone and how his tone, turns people off. And they would make claims that he's teaching hate, and you're teaching people to hate America. And how could you do this? And you're an American citizen, and you have this, and you have all these things. And he said, but I never considered this to be a black eye for America. This is not me taking a swing at America. This is me, number one, holding America accountable, but in so doing, providing us a way to be better. How can we be better? How can we improve as a nation if we don't acknowledge our shortcomings and address those shortcomings and fix those shortcomings? And then to frame history the way it should be framed, the good and the bad, so that then we can learn to be better based off of the reality of who we were, right? And he said this, he said, I don't look at the past as, oh, America was so bad. I look at the past and say, look at the mistakes we made so that we don't make them again.
Well, so this goes directly to the question of how we study history at all.
Exactly.
Right? Which is, if those who don't study history are doomed to repeat those mistakes, those who prohibit the study of history are deliberately
looking to repeat it.
Going after those errors and trying to repeat them on purpose.
Right.
Which brings me, by the way, and this is, I haven't even begun the planning for this, but my hope is that I believe we need a new Freedom Ride movement. I'd like to call it Freedom Rides 24. And I think one of the things we should be doing is we should be going into states where books are banned and holding
banned book reading. Well, let's talk about what the Freedom Rides were during the Civil Rights Movement. What was the goal and the aim of the Freedom Rides to begin with? It was to bring the attention to what was happening in the South. Many people didn't believe that African Americans were being lynched. They didn't believe that there was segregated baths. They didn't believe it. They're like, this is, we're a modern country, right? So what are you talking about? This is outrageous. And so the idea of the Freedom Rides was to bring the attention and to get students particularly, but people who were willing to go down and see for themselves. And so everybody jumped on these buses and they went down south to see for themselves and to stand in solidarity with the people to whom these things were happening. And I would venture to say it worked. To a certain degree, it worked.
Well, at great hazard.
At great risk and yeah, great hazard, but it did work.
So, but there is, and there is a storytelling piece of that,
Mhm.
which is, of course, part of it is that we continue to try to tell a story that people have ignored.
Right.
Right. So one of the reasons for yet again another retelling, right? So, you know, what Professor Sinha does is what E.B. Du Bois did in the 1930s, which is attempt to counter an entire school of
Right.
historiography, of telling history,
Right.
because Du Bois, there is a school saying that, oh, slavery wasn't so bad, oh, the Civil War was actually about states' rights, and nobody paid for the Civil War who were actually the criminals, the traitors who rebelled against the United States.
They were traitors. They rebelled against the United States. And then at the emancipation, they were given reparations.
Well, they were welcomed back into the government.
They were welcomed back into the fold and they were compensated for their loss of property.
Andrew Johnson, the first president ever impeached, a president who was notorious. I mean, we can't even list the terrible things that he did. Comes back as a senator from Tennessee, from Tennessee or Kentucky, and Alexander Stevens, vice president
Of the Confederacy,
gets reelected and comes back as a congressperson. So nothing in the 14th Amendment, what the Supreme Court did in June about immunity for for the president, and did earlier with regard to these saying that in order to enforce the 14th Amendment, Congress needs to pass a law. Something that has no precedent at all.
Right, never
They're
been done.
just doing exactly what was done in the wake of the Civil War, which is that those who were traitors were let free and without any accountability. And the higher up they were in the hierarchy, the less accountable.
Yeah.
And so here we have yet again a person who has led an insurrection against the United States.
Yes.
Who has been held not only unaccountable by our society, but by the highest court in our society.
Yep.
So this is nothing new. It is all happening over and over again. So why is it happening over and over again?
Why is it happening all over again?
Oh, Chris says she's reading about the Freedom Rides in John Lewis's autobiography, which maybe we ought to read.
Yes. Passing notes in class.
So a couple of reasons why it's happening all over again. Number one, our basic reason. We don't know what happened before, right? We whitewashed the Civil War. We whitewashed the Reconstruction. We blamed the failure of Reconstruction on uneducated Black people. That somehow or another Black people weren't ready. And here is the thing. Whenever we as a country say, so-and-so is not ready for equality, so-and-so is not ready for leadership, we have heard it in the last couple of months. No, we're not ready for a woman of color as president.
We weren't ready for an African-American male for president not too long ago.
And why not? Why not? Because too many empowered white Americans want to stay in power and don't want the image of their power challenged.
Yep. Yeah.
We are not ready because we are not ready for the implications of what it would be to actually have a more equitable society.
Well, because they don't want to share power, right? And this was the whole thing of the Reconstruction to begin with. The Reconstruction signaled the equal share. No, the Reconstruction allowed formerly enslaved human beings to take part in the political process that they had previously been banned from. And history, true history shows that the recently freed human beings were more than equipped to be American citizens. They were equipped. They could work, they could own a business, they could file their taxes, they voted, they understood politics, they ran for office, they got office. So there were so many African Americans who held positions of power and authority in our country during the Reconstruction. And the problem of Reconstruction, the reason why it failed was not because of uneducated Black people, it was because the whites in power did not want to share that power, especially not with African Americans.
Well, and more importantly, because it was violently overthrown.
Yes,
Right.
it failed because it was overthrown, right?
It was
Violently overthrown.
Not just by the Ku Klux Klan, but by white communities in the wake of the dismantling of the Klan by Grant and the Ku Klux Klan Act. By the way, one of the things that Professor Sinha really helps us see is that we are reusing laws from the 1870s.
Oh, yeah.
Against white supremacist terrorists again.
Yep.
It was
Same laws.
It was the law it was the Ku Klux Klan Act that allowed the case against the Charlottesville people to go forward. That was the law under which they were.
They're using the same laws. I mean, you look at the tactics that certain political parties have been using to suppress the voter, so the voter suppression policies, right? This is straight out of the Reconstruction law books. I mean, the same laws in the Reconstruction. They said we don't
made possible by the undoing of the Voting Rights Act.
Exactly.
By the Supreme Court in Shelby County.
That's right.
Which undid the law, the work of the 1960s.
The work of the 1960s, right?
So again, the issue is it's the same things all over again. And until we pull back the veil on our history, until we accept that part of being American is struggling with the difficulties of America. That we are happy as having come through the Teddy Roosevelt site today, we are more than happy to tout all our greatness. Without ever saying who paid for it. And we have a much more international space in this room today, which is really good to see. And we still say this stuff over and over again. What enables American hegemony, American inequality to persist? Well, we demand things like inexpensive clothing. Who pays for our inexpensive clothing? Somebody who gets underpaid in a factory in another country. Somebody who has to live in environmental degradation in another country. Anything that we pay less for, somebody pays more for.
Yep.
And we have always done that. We have always sowed those costs downstream at the expense for our own benefits. And, this allows me to walk into a store and get a $20 t-shirt that's pretty nice that actually should be costing me $40 or $50 were it actually made by Americans. And in America, with environmental protections and with sustainable energy and sustainable products.
But even that, I mean, I read an article about this before. I'm trying to put it into words. What you just said, the only reason why we're paying what we pay is because it's been manufactured somewhere else. And why is it being manufactured somewhere else? It's not because of the consumers, which they like to blame it on us. They like to blame it on immigrants. They want to blame it on all these other factors, but they don't want to tell the truth. The truth is they're the ones getting the profit, right? They're the ones who skim off the top. And so they don't want to pay taxes in America. And so paying those taxes, it makes America great. It feeds our economy. It makes things better for everyone. They don't want to do it. They would much rather take
And
their distributions from another country where they don't have to pay all those absorbent taxes, right?
and globalization is the 21st century vanilla way of saying empire.
Yes. Yeah.
Because so part of the point of Immerwahr's book, How to Hide an Empire, is that so he asked the question, why at the end of World War II did the United States not do what every other successful empire has done, which is hold on to Japan
Mm.
and make Japan into America.
A vassal.
Hold on to West Germany and
Mhm.
West Germany into America. I mean, look what happened to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union made all of Eastern Europe, for all intents and purposes, the Soviet Union.
Yep.
But the United States didn't. The United States occupation of the enemies from World War II was incredibly brief. Why? Why would the United States, as the preeminent power in the world in 1947, walk away?
Or did they really walk away? Maybe physically they walked away, but not economically.
Correct. So it's globalization is empire by another name.
That's right.
Because now there's McDonald's in every country. in the
Every
world.
country.
And, to the extent that we see that the dollar is still the way people buy things,
Mhm.
right? So what we have is a different way of farming out empire. And empire has always been a way of making people who we identify as not us pay for stuff for us.
Yep. I mean, they call it what? Economic colonialism. Neo-colonialism is basically economic colonialism.
Right. Well, because all of the technology that I put together to try to make this work today it requires cobalt and
Yep.
lithium and all of these battery
That doesn't come from
technology.
America.
And we don't. It could. We have a number of those mines, but NIMBY, not in my backyard.
Right. Right. Not in my backyard. Right. Go digging over there.
By the way, there is a yes in my backyard movement now. There is a
Really?
NIMBY movement going on that we ought to do these things. So there, in our last 25 minutes before, and we have, for some reason or another, Chris, we so appreciate you for showing up because we lost our remote viewers today. Our changing time must have hurt our remote attendance. But in any event, we like to take our conversation into a proactive, what do we do about this? We can diagnose our issues at great length. God only knows, the list is long. So therefore, knowing what we have begun to know, in addition to, going and maybe doing banned book readings in Florida, or as I was, I think, what is it? Is it Iowa that is requiring the reading of the Bible in schools now? I figured we could do a study the Bible with a rabbi movement in Iowa, because we read the Bible a little differently. And in addition to these things, what other things do we think we could be doing, especially in this question of telling a better story? How do we tell this story better that leads to not just better storytelling, but better acting in the world? Better acting. I mean, obviously, go out and register voters. I think we are not a political campaign here, but I don't think there are people here who are actually voting for the former president in the coming election. If you want to, obviously it's your right, but I think there's a certain degree of enthusiasm and energy for the Harris-Walz campaign in this room, at least, both physically and metaphorically. So vote is important. Except when they clearly were white people burned it down, always burning black and brown things down. Yes. So
having a sidebar over here.
I see. We can always report on the sidebar. But what else are we going to do? I mean, we've got to vote. We've got to vote so much that we bring our country back into a place where our legislature starts working again, because our legislature hasn't been working.
Yeah.
We need to be in relationship with our elected representatives, and not allow them to say stupid things without consequences.
Yeah.
We've talked about the need for spending more time with each other.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
Just think of this gathering. Our gatherings in person have been amazingly multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural. And here, multinational.
But I think the big thing for me is learning to talk to each other and still be different and have differing views and opinions. We talk about our country is so polarized, right? You can't disagree on one thing. And if you disagree with someone on one thing, you're immediately enemies. Like off the rip, you're enemies. They'll put you in a camp. You're labeled and you're put into this category. And I feel like we're missing a lot of nuance here. I think, and now let me talk about myself personally. I am conservative on a few things and I'm liberal on a few things. And some things I'm very progressive on. But for some reason, I'm never able to communicate that, because as soon as I communicate what I'm conservative on, I'm labeled as a conservative. And I'm like, but you didn't hear me. Look at the other things that I'm very, very liberal on. And so we don't have the opportunity lately, within the last decade or so, 2 decades, we've just stopped honoring nuance. And we've taken these differences and we've multiplied them and we've exacerbated them to the point where we really can't even talk to each other anymore.
So I had an interesting experience in sort of counterpoint to what you're talking about. I made some phone calls on behalf of the Harris campaign a week and a half ago. And so this was just after Harris announced. And I'm on behalf of the Democratic Party, I'm calling people in Virginia. And I am explicit. I'm calling on behalf of the Democratic Party and the Harris campaign. Are you planning on voting? Who are you planning on voting for? And my job, I realized, was to listen.
Mm-hmm. Say that again, please.
My job was to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, it doesn't take long for most people to figure out what I think about something. I'm not shy. But one of the things I get to bring to those conversations is interest in what somebody else thinks. So somebody was talking about how they felt that the economy was really hurting them. I said, okay, I hear that. What do you mean by that? And they said, oh, well, prices in the supermarket are much higher and gas is much higher. And I said, I feel that. I do the shopping for my household. And I could say that prices seem higher in the supermarket, and I'm with you there. I said, though, the difference in gas prices between now and 5 years ago is not that much.
Mm-hmm.
And that forced the person to think about it.
Mm.
I was able to force the person to think about it because I didn't say, these are the facts. I wasn't going to argue economic indicators with him.
Mm-hmm.
Because this was a person who wasn't monitoring economic indicators like how well the stock market was doing. Because most of us, the whole idea that politicians are arguing about how well the stock market is doing when the majority of us don't make our income off the stock market.
Right.
More Americans own stocks than ever before, but that just means that more Americans have more, let's talk about it, white upper middle class Americans for the most part,
Yes.
have their retirement funds in
Stock options. Mm-hmm.
So that's not that most Americans are making their living off the stock market, right? Even my not quite retired mother, who, God bless you, Mom, I appreciate all your generosity and your wherewithal. When the stock market dropped on Monday, you were worried. Now, that's irrational.
Mm.
Because the drop on Monday was followed by a recovery on Tuesday.
Exactly.
Because most Americans who are heavily invested in the stock market are in it for the long term.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are making money off of it on a regular basis are the very wealthy. The rest of us, so my conversation with this person was about how do the economics impact us?
Yes. How does it reach you individually or us as a local community? That's the thing, especially when you talk about something that John Stewart was talking to an economist about in an interview. He was saying, how is it that we can talk about how bad the economy is for us, and yet most economists, even during the pandemic, they were recording record profits. So how bad is the economy, and who is the economy bad for? Is it bad for them, or is it bad for us? Right?
Well, market indicators are not indicators.
Exactly.
Right. I had another conversation with a woman who was very upset about abortion because they took to heart the misspeaking of a Virginia politician who said, we can even do abortions after birth.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Weird.
Weird, right? So, but this person went out of their way to call and pose as somebody looking for a late-term abortion and call Planned Parenthood to see if they could get an abortion at 6 months in their pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And the person at Planned Parenthood does what the responsible person at a healthcare clinic does, which said, come on in for a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So this person took their quote unquote own research as this means that what Planned Parenthood in their neighborhood was offering was an abortion in 6 months.
Right.
Which is not what Planned Parenthood is offering.
Not at all.
What they were offering was counseling on what to do, because family planning from the Planned Parenthood perspective includes a whole host of options, only one of which is abortion.
Right.
However, this person was really concerned that there are a whole bunch of late-term abortions going on in the United States where now women are afraid to get pregnant because if they go to their doctor in Texas and they have a problematic pregnancy, they may not get treated.
Right.
So, but I couldn't have gotten to that conversation with that person had I not been willing to listen first. So I think what we, in terms of where we need to be proactive, and you're right, Reverend Hughes, we gotta get past the polarization stuff. We gotta get past this is my perspective and therefore I can't talk to you stuff.
Right.
And you and I have had the conversation about the importance of litmus tests.
Right.
Yes, somebody's outside.
My goodness.
And that from your perspective as an African American, you need some litmus tests for conversations because you need to be able to trust somebody.
Yes. To even have just to have a simple conversation, I need to know that I can trust that person because I'm going to be honest. And if I know that my honesty will be offensive to somebody, then I know what I can and what I can't say. Right.
So there is the realm of tact.
Yes.
And the realm of whether or not I can go so far in this conversation with this person. Right. However, the flip side of that is the witness has to even sit down with them.
Yeah, that was going to say, right? Should I even sit down and talk with this person? Right? Is it even worth my time?
And you've experienced this, I think, and it's very important to talk about the illiberalism of the left. Right? That when you say I'm conservative on some issues, that means some people shut down. Because they have already identified you as not worth talking to because you're not one of them.
Right.
We have a crisis of identitarianism.
Yes, we do.
Yasha Monk wrote a book called The Identity Trap, which I very much now I need to reread because I need to figure out my version of it. But everybody wants their own team. I'm the parent of a young person who identifies as non-binary in gender. So our daughter now is our child. And is correcting us all should we mistake and call them she or her. Sadie's also painting their nails and shopping for particularly feminine clothing and underwear with her mother, their mother. So there's a lot going on for Sadie right now. I think that the non-binary stuff is about finding their own tribe. I think they want to feel that there is a group among whom they feel 100% them. And validated and affirmed for their identity. And this is the flip side of the litmus test stuff, right? You can't talk with me if you're not X, Y, Z, and if you are even one of these things just a little, I'm
Then
not
you're,
talking.
you're out. Yeah. Yeah.
Because everybody wants their team.
Right.
They want to make sure their team.
And
is
they want their
pure.
team above all others, which I find problematic.
And look, we have, you know, Cori Bush lost her primary yesterday, in large part because of her stance on on Hamas and the Israel-Palestinian conflict.
Mm.
So a bunch of very, very strongly held opinions with regard to Israel and Palestine, which is honestly, I mean, such a complicated issue that the whole idea that one can witness test it.
Just like that.
Or go down to a slogan. Again, we're not talking with one
Right.
another about it.
Right.
We're just yelling at each other.
And this, I believe, I don't sit in the House of Representatives. I'm not there around a bunch of senators when bills are passed or not passed. But I wonder if that's not why these bills never get passed. There are all kinds of partisan bills that have been proposed that is supposed to help our country, and yet they don't get passed. Well, because there's a caveat in there that we didn't like. But what about the what about the rest of it?
So this used to be the way things got done.
Right.
Right? Things got done. I care about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
In order for me to get this issue passed, I'm going to compromise to get you to vote for it because you're going to have your issue put in the bill.
Exactly. Right.
And now, taking a spending bill and adding provisions that say, for example, prohibit the U.S. military from providing pregnancy care for women because it might lead to abortions.
They scrapped the whole thing.
Right. It
scraps the whole thing.
So we are in sort of a nightmare scenario of the lack of compromise because everybody wants to put their own thing in.
Right.
I won't vote for your thing unless this unrelated other.
Yeah,
thing
this
gets
little
in.
caveat here is addressed.
So we
Yeah.
don't get anything done.
Right.
Interestingly enough, we can look back at what has gotten done. You know, Biden got the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 passed. There is so much good stuff in there. I cannot believe that he got it passed.
Yeah.
We need people who are willing to relationship build with each other, to trust
Right.
build with each other, to say,
Right.
hey, this is good for all of us. And again, what happened when infrastructure got passed here in this country is we ended up with people who voted against it taking credit for it.
Right. The very people. Yeah, they got credit. They didn't want it.
So with 9 minutes left in our conversation, 10 minutes left in our conversation, we've done a little bit of the what next, which I think really is what we're trying to do. How do we, one of the things I'd like to see is where do we next take this conversation? Our next conversation is going to be with Dr. Jennifer Roberts, who is an amazing scholar on environmental racism. I think we're doing it entirely remote because I don't think she'll be here in town. She is currently working on a book. And I have her postcard. Buffalo's Emerald Necklace, How Environmental Racism Devastated a Community and Destroyed an Homestead Treasure. So this is about the environmental racism that led to the destruction of the Olmsted Design Park System here in Buffalo, right? The remnants of which are now the Skagwada Parkway, which is destroyed. The park that used to be, so speaking of the Teddy Roosevelt site, the park that used to be was the park on which the exposition, the Pan American Expo took place. The only remnant of which is from that exposition is the Buffalo History Museum, right? That whole park was undone by the Skagwada Parkway.
Wow.
Because Robert Moses wanted to connect another freeway, the Kensington, the 33, with the 190, with the 198. So, but the big impact that was only the minor impact. The big impact was the interchange between 198 and the 33, between the Scotiaquida and the Kensington, is in the heart of what was an upper middle class African American neighborhood, Humboldt Parkway. The extension, if you've ever been on Lincoln Parkway and Chapin Parkway and Bidwell Parkway, all named for, by the way, Civil War generals,
Yeah.
figures.
Bidwell,
right?
yeah.
These are United States
Traitors.
heroes of the Civil War. So that's why they were named that way. But they were connected to the Humboldt Parkway. And that interchange between the Scotiaquida and the 198 and the Kensington and the 33 destroyed that neighborhood. And the extension of the 33 took the parkway that existed down Humboldt Parkway and turned it into a submerged highway. So this is what the focus of Dr. Roberts' book. She's going to be joining us for our next conversation on environmental racism. So we will have a whole reading list. She's got stuff that she has suggested for us. I encourage everyone, if you haven't read it already, to read Harriet Washington's excellent book called A Terrible Thing to Waste, Environmental Racism and Its Assault on the American Mind. That will certainly make us all informed for next time. I found a book at the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad historical site called Love Canal Revisited, Race, Class, and Gender in Environmental Activism. I haven't read it yet, so I can't recommend it, but I will before next time. And so that's for next time, which is 2 weeks from today, August 21st, back at our normal time at noon, and back in our fully remote setting.
Fully remote.
Which will make it a little bit more convenient, if less fun to be in person. We will take suggestions from all of you with regard to where we go next. We're going to continue on our dates every other week, so that means we've got a September 4th and a September 18th date. We have some ideas of what we want to read, although Eddie Glaude Jr.'s latest, we may want to read. Eddie Glaude has gone out into the progressive anti-Semitic world, so I don't know how much we want to use him, but we can talk about that. That'll be an interesting conversation. But in addition to that, I would really like to see at some point maybe us do a one of our sessions at the John B. Wylie Center on the east side, maybe in the Colored Musicians Club.
I vote for that.
So we'll continue to have field trips. I continue to look for good books. New books that have come out recently or are coming out are Anne Applebaum's Autocracy, Inc. and Mary Ann Frank's Fearless Speech, both of which have been recommended to me. Anne Applebaum is very interesting. Her book is called Autocracy, Inc. The Dictators Who Want to Rule the World. So we have all sorts of things coming up, but really I want to focus on environmental racism for our next time. Because right now we're actually in the throes of figuring out what to do with that parkway, with Humboldt Parkway, with the Kensington extension, and whether or not to turn it into a tunnel, which seems like, from my perspective, a misguided Band-Aid as opposed to actually restoring it to the parkway that once was. Any thoughts or questions? Chris, do you have any thoughts since you joined us? I want to make sure you get heard.
Yeah, so the Humboldt Parkway Tunnel is freaking ridiculous. It's like the stupidest thing I have ever heard, and I've heard a lot of, well, I shouldn't say that, but it's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
It's certainly not the wisest approach to a problem that all of us could do better on, for sure. So I look forward to having your participation in our next discussion as well.
So I'm not sure I'll be able to make it. I'll have to consume that through your recordings.
Okay, well, we will figure it out.
Yep.
Any other questions? Yes, Barb.
I'm just wondering how we could bring together a larger group of people for a listening session and, choose a topic for that session.
Well,
And I think maybe a theme should be the common good.
so one of the things that I would like to figure out how we could facilitate is how do we bring an Orchard Park meeting into an East Side setting?
Mhm.
And then maybe bring an East Side group to Orchard Park.
Yep,
So,
I'd be down for that.
maybe we can talk to Corey Gibson at one of the church, Pastor Gibson at one of the churches on the East Side. He's at Cavalry Baptist on Genesee, and so we could do that and maybe make Accomplices for Justice live from his church.
Okay,
Does it need to be faith-based?
No, it doesn't.
no, it doesn't have to be faith-based at all.
Because the Orchard Park Library sponsors lots and lots of, and actually the West Seneca Library too.
Good idea. All right.
Programs. I think probably Orchard Park does more. Different programs. They run programs all the time.
No,
There's
I'd love-
also the new senior center, which is not just for seniors.
Well, we could meet at the Merriweather Library on Jefferson as well.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly.
One of the reasons I thought of combining efforts with another faith institution is to make sure that we had East Siders in our meeting.
Right.
Well, I know this summer, the county brought busloads of East Side residents to the park,
Mhm.
and ran programs there.
Mm.
I think we need, in the service of building trusting relationships, we need to be willing to go places where we are all
Exactly.
uncomfortable. So I would love to do that. Pastor Hughes, any other comments, suggestions, questions?
No, I'm all about this this banned book reading tour.
Me
I
too.
wanna know more about that.
Oh,
I wanna know what we can do, how we can organize it. Because I'd really like to be a big part of that.
all right. Well, I suppose you've given me homework, huh?
Yeah. I mean,
So write up a proposal and see.
yeah, let's see what we can do because yeah.
So for everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you if you are watching this at another time. You can find all of our information and future events at our website, which is actually opendoorjudaism.org. So at opendoorjudaism.org, which is just as it sounds. You can find our upcoming meetings. You can find links to everything past and that we've done, including the audio or the video, either on YouTube or on a podcast. And you can find a link to donate. We are both on Patreon and if you want to be a member, and we are so grateful to our Patreon members who make monthly donations and make this possible. And to those of you who have generously donated online or in person, we are grateful. I have not sent out thank you letters, but you will receive them because those are donations to a nonprofit, so you can take them as a tax write-off. With that, we wish all of you blessings in August. May your days be not as hot and humid as they are in some places. May there be a cool breeze of blessing. May your travels, if you are traveling in the summer, be ones for the good, for yourself and for the people you're connecting with. And may all of us find ways to bring a little bit more justice in our lives and to the world and to each other. Thank you all so much for being here. It's really great to be in this place with all of you and in wherever you are with all of you as well. Wishing you all goodness. Take care.
God bless.